This is Keir Starmer promising zero tolerance for benefit cheats as Labour seeks to tackle Britain's ballooning welfare bill. There's sort of a deja vu, isn't there, of that statement? You almost hear every Prime Minister, Secretary of State have said this for many, many years. That's what he's saying. A rise in people self-diagnosing with mental health problems is being blamed for the worklessness crisis. We've discussed this many times, of course, and it comes as councils are being told to draw up a Get Britain Working plan to tackle the issue in their area. Let's speak with Fraser Nelson, political journalist, former editor at The Spectator, who's produced a Channel 4 documentary on the issue called Britain's Benefit Scandal. It's a Dispatches. It airs on December 2nd, Fraser. I think I'm right in saying.
Today.
A week today.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on getting it out there. This, as I said there in the intro, this comes up all the time and nothing changes.
It does, but the difference is that we were getting a handle on it from until about sort of 2018.
Yeah.
There's almost a 20-year decline in the number of sickness benefits, then it starts to surge. So in the last 5 years, it's gone from just over 2 million to just over 3 million, and it's forecast to hit 4 million in just 4 years' time.
I mean, they're huge figures.
Staggering. I mean, we're ripping the heart out of communities every single day. At the last count, 3,000 people a day were being signed on to long-term sickness benefits. And once you're signed on to that, you don't hear very much from the system ever again. So this is a huge waste, not just of money, but of talent, of workers. I mean, there's no way the economy is ever going to prosper if we're writing off so many people at such great speed.
Indeed. What is happening here? We mentioned the self-diagnosis of mental health issues. Whenever we've discussed this, every time that comes up, and of course it's almost the sort of Gordian knot of this whole debate. How do you know, is everybody suddenly got mentally ill? Is it has just basic stress and a bit of anxiety now being overdiagnosed? What's happening?
Well, all over the world, you can see the increase in the prescriptions of antidepressants, and some of the stigma around mental health has decreased, so people are more likely to say that they're suffering from depression, anxiety. It's gone from being something niche to being something a lot more common. Now, in a way, it's a good thing. People can talk about these things more openly. The problem is the welfare system. They equal 70% of the claims now, the new claims, are mentioning mental health. So it's possible to say that via anxiety, via depression, you'd like to be signed off on long-term sickness benefits. Now, in a way, you can't really blame people for trying if they're told the money's there. But the government is saying yes to this at a staggering rate. So the problem is not people trying to manipulate the system or trying to defraud the system. The problem is the system. At any stage, the government, right now, all it takes is a footnote from a doctor, and then you've got about an hour phone interview for the work capability assessment. Now, for the documentary, I spoke to people involved in these assessments. They're very uncomfortable with it. There's one of them said to me, look, there's no way over the phone you can tell if somebody's so depressed or anxious that he can't work, and yet
to that level,
we're asked to make an assessment on this basis, people we don't even see.
Wow.
So there's very little resource put into working out if people are genuinely sick enough, or whether they might need more support.
Let's have a little look at what is happening in this documentary. This is Fraser Nelson's documentary for Dispatches, Britain's Benefit Scandal. It airs on Monday, December the 2nd. Have a look.
More than 3 million people are now on long-term sickness benefits, up by about 1 million in just 5 years. And these figures are set to get far worse.
Well, we're not going to get Britain growing again unless we get Britain working again.
I'm getting like £1,400 a month.
Oh, there's just a little taster of what's to come. Liz Kendall was in that clip, of course. She's the Work and Pensions Secretary. Often said by people even on the right, you know, she's the Labour minister we quite like. She is quite tough. And she means it. This is not bluster and her just wheeling out a press release. She's onto this. Is that fair?
She is. She completely shares the urgency. And what she said there was exactly right. We're not going to get the economy growing again unless we can get people back into work. The problem is that there's a bit of a power illusion here. You get ministers, whether Labour or Tory, they say, oh, we're going to change this. And when they get there, they find out that they can't actually change the system. It's so big, if they try to, they get sued. Mel Stride, the last Tory, he does reforms. He got a judicial review levied against him that'll get held up to the courts. They lost a judicial review last time. So you've got a situation where the government knows how bad it is. They know how many lives they're losing, but they can't change it because if they do, some of the activists will sue them and nothing happens.
What is I mean, the difficulty is, as we touched on a second ago, is this whole definition of mental health, isn't it? I mean, that's the big one. And for years, as you rightly say, you know, it wasn't even talked about. It wasn't, you know, it was, oh, come on, sort yourself out, pull yourself together. And people who genuinely had a problem, you know, struggled with that. Some people didn't even survive that because there was a bit of a taboo around it. You didn't talk about it. Now, of course, the problem, that analysis has sort of gone full 180. Doctors in a million years are never going to put their name to saying, no, you haven't got a mental health crisis. The people on the other end of the phones, as you say, doing the interview, they're not going to say it either. No boss is going to say it. I mean, it's said by, when we talk about this, people call in and say it's the easiest way to get a day off work. You know, the minute you cite that, bang, no one's going to argue.
You're right, and a lot of the footnotes are for exactly that. When you ask your GP to get a footnote, I think 95% of them say yes. But I spoke to a GP for the documentary who said, look, we're not the DWP police. We're not here to decide who does and doesn't get benefits. The NHS is being abused, if you like, for these footnotes. We're never fit for that purpose. Now, of course, I think people need more support than just being given a 1-hour phone interview and a 10-minute appointment with a GP. But they need a bit more attention. But it's a lot easier to tick the box that puts them into, quite often, as that guy said in the clip, £1,400 a month, which is a lot more than he could expect to get via working.
Have we sort of lowered the bar, though, as to what mental health is? I mean, is that what's going to happen here? You know, most people just, you know, every day we've all had a struggle, we've all had our sleepless nights, you know, we've all had issues with our families, our relationships, and work isn't always fantastic, even on the outside when it looks great, etc. We've all been there. I mean, you know, most people just call that life, right? I mean, you know, we live in the Western world. What comes with that are lots of great joys and freedoms. But once in a while, life's a little bit, you know, a bit rocky. The path is a bit challenging. And that's not a mental health issue. That's just existing, right?
Yeah, and the feeling that you can't go on is quite a common feeling. A lot of people go through that at the time.
Of course.
So the issue is that we medicalise it now, and we medicalise something that can't actually be examined, not properly, not medically. You can give your best guess, but it takes quite a lot of effort. I mean, for the film, I talked to a psychiatrist who was saying that there's lots of doubt over where you do draw the line, or what cancels as properly depressed. Now, there are some cases where obviously people are depressed, but there are other periods where you're going through a difficult time. But one thing that's not going to help you is being written off, being told to sit in your room and basically sit out the economy, sit out society. People are not going to get better that way.
But I also wonder whether there's loads of other things at play at this kind of particular point in the sort of anthropological journey, if you like. You know, humans have reached a stage of, I think self-analysis is a big issue. We've never before done the navel-gazing. You know, I grew up in a working-class background where it was just the norm to be a bit skint. Nobody really talked about it. That was your expected predisposition. If it changed once in a while, then great. But most of the time, all the people I lived around were in that place. Now, of course, we analyse the life out of those situations, whether we see it as an injustice. We look ahead, life's got very expensive, whether it's mortgage rates, rents, whatever it happens to be. And I wonder whether that sort of navel-gazing era, I don't know whether psychiatrists would call it that, but, you know, that era where we don't stop talking about our lot or lack of anything has kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy. People, you know, look at work now and go, yeah, do I want to work 40 hours a week? I don't fancy it, to be honest.
Well, if the government gives you the option of getting effectively 80% of your salary or even the same salary by not working, but not everybody would persist where they're not always interesting jobs. That is the brutal, by the way, that was true for mental health or anything else. Now, what you describe as a worldwide phenomenon, right around the Western world, people are opening up a lot more about mental health. People are, but the question is, when you look around the world, where no other country is seeing a surge in sickness benefits like Britain. The Institute of Physical Studies did exactly this study. So we're saying, look, in Sweden it's down, in America it's down, in Canada it's down. Only in Denmark is a little bit up, but the UK is surging. So you need a welfare system that can adjust for the fact that people are way more likely to present now with mental health complaints, and then you can properly ask the question, is it really the best thing, the most compassionate thing, to write this person off work for the foreseeable?
Keir Starmer talks about zero tolerance on this. The phrase as well that I think was used was no more business as usual. How serious would he? Is it in Mr. Starmer's DNA to tackle this?
I think that he has to, because one of his stated aims is to get the highest growth in the G7.
Yeah.
Now, if we hadn't lost 1 million people due to sickness benefit, we would have the highest growth in the G7. That's one of the studies that comes out in the film. But so he needs to do this, but wanting to do it isn't the same as being able to.
Yeah.
So he would have to show that he can master the government system better than the Conservatives were able. So how would he manage to stand up to all the various charities, most of whom are pretty Labour sympathetic,
Sure.
and then get accused, as Ian Duncan Smith was, of being cruel?
Yeah.
This is the hardest thing you can do in politics. Nobody will thank you for it. Ken Loach will make a film about you. This was about but that I, Daniel Blake film was about welfare reform.
Yes.
You will just get bullets hurled at
Which
you.
some people thought was a documentary, but it was.
But that's that's what you get.
Yeah.
Now, is Keir Starmer ready, really, to do that tough love welfare reform? I would say it's progressive,
Yeah.
but it's not clear to me that he's got an agenda yet to match the words he's spoken today.
That's interesting, because I remember Ian Duncan Smith, when in opposition, obviously he had his time as Tory leader, and then went off to the Centre for Social Justice, started all of that, or was very heavily involved in that. I can remember him doing, in opposition, every time he did a TV interview. I remember once he was brought onto the BBC, when the BBC do the youth question time, which is one of the most annoying pieces of television you can ever watch, and it's more left-wing than an Albanian keep left sign, this show. So they clearly booked Ian Duncan Smith thinking, he's going to get a right pasting from the audience. And they were all applauding him, because he was saying some really good things. And wherever he went, there seemed to be this general, wow, this guy, Duncan Smith, he wasn't a great Tory leader, but he's really onto this one. Then, of course, you get into power and start to do it, and that's a very different thing, isn't it? Because then you go from being a bloke with a good idea to that evil man that's taking away people's ability to feed their family.
Yeah. But in the way, Ian Duncan Smith felt like he was kind of undead. He'd already been a Tory leader, he'd lost it.
Yeah.
He didn't care what people said about him. Very rare you get a politician who was not ambitious, who's not looking for a next job. So he just went out there and took lead for quite a number of years.
Yep.
And as a result, we had the highest economic participation rate in British history just before the pandemic. This is why all this stuff about lazy Britain is nonsense, because it was only a few years ago that we had a record number of people.
It was working.
It was working. We've done it before, we can do it again. We just need the right incentives. And to work out, this isn't about people being work shy, this is about the incentives we put in front of them. Work needs to pay more, and welfare needs to be tougher to claim if you don't really need it.
I'm bound to ask, while you're with us, Fraser, I mean, you've been a political journalist for about 97 years. It goes through you like a stick of rock and all the rest of it. This survey today, this petition that is out there, I mean, we have seen these before. 2,216,998 people want the government to go. The petition is quite clear. It was started by, I think, a pub landlord. I believe the current Labour government has gone back on its promises they laid out in the lead-up to the election. I would like, therefore, for there to be another general election. Right, spoiler alert, there won't be one. But what do we do with this information? What do you think number 10 makes of something like this?
It's kind of mood music, really. I mean, obviously a government with a huge majority under no pressure at all to have an election that would obviously lead in the cutting of its majority, right? So that is just simply not going to happen. But the fact that this is happening, people can see it, but it catches the mood that actually, yes, we didn't tell us about these tax rises before the election. They led us to believe there wouldn't be any, and now there are going to be some. So, and this farmers, this lots of stuff we weren't told about, and it wasn't so long ago. So there is a sense that people feel a bit let down. It normally happens in year 2, year 3 of a government. It's happening now in month 4, month 5. You can see it in the ratings. So I think this shows you just the problem is that a lot of promises were made, but for reasons we were discussing earlier, actually changing things is so much more difficult than it was in, say, the 70s or 80s because of all the forces trying to stop people from reforming.
Indeed. Listen, Fraser, it's been great to have you on with us. The documentary is on a week today. It's Channel 4's Dispatches, always an interesting documentary strand. This one presented and written by Fraser Nelson, Britain's Benefits Scandal, 8 p.m, Channel 4 next Monday.